I'm Doug Vernon. This is my take on music recording. There are many different uses for recorded music, and we explore a somewhat unusual application in this episode. My guest is Karttikeya. He only uses one name. He is the engineer and often a musician for Music Together Worldwide, which produces music for early childhood education. Music Together's goal is to instill a love of music in kids from infants up to 5 years old. There are similar programs for older kids. We start out with an explanation of how it works.
Yeah, Music Together, we are actually coming up on our 35th year anniversary, by the way. So it's been around a long time, and we're confident to say it's the gold standard in early childhood music development. We call it a early childhood music development program. The core audience, so to speak, is kids from birth to age 5. So it's before preschool. We do also have an in-school program that takes it into the school setting and preschools. We have a somewhat newer program called Rhythm Kids for kids from 5 to 8 years old. So the early group, birth to 5, is a music experience for those kids because they're very young. The program is deeply research-based, and it's developmentally appropriate for them. And we know what you can expect from kids even at 6 months old because, it's gone into brain research. It's very deep. So for those kids, it's a music experience, and we say that the experience is for the kids, the education is for the parents, because the parents or caregivers bring the kids to the class. If you enroll in Music Together, you would come for a 45-minute class once a week for a semester, then you can re-enroll. I say one of the core premises is that we're all born with the same capacity for basic music competence as we are for basic language competence, most people. And it's a matter of what is supported at that early age. Language is naturally supported by everyone around them. Music in our society is not as much in the Western culture. It's become more of the dichotomy of, music producers and music consumers. In other cultures around the world, some other cultures, there's no need for Music Together because music is part of their lives from birth, So this is a way to help bridge that gap in the West and just to make music expression natural for people. We're not trying to make musicians out of everyone, but to make it a natural part of growing up and life. And, if they want to sing later, then they should feel that they can sing. We have heard from early childhood educators that teach piano or other instruments. They can identify who's been to Music Together before that because certain fundamentals are there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. And, as being a parent, I've noticed that myself. When little kids, they can be really, really little. Mm-hmm. They respond to music and rhythm, and they are uninhibited. They don't feel any hesitancy to express themselves, which I think sort of gets bred out of us over time for so many people.
Yeah.
Catch those kids when they're early and make them really love music from the beginning.
Definitely. And we'll get into more of what I do specifically for the company. One thing I had done in the past was audio for the video shoots, because we do teachers around the world that we support. One of those ways of support are training videos. So I was doing the audio for those for many years. So I got to see some of the best teachers, and they would explain what they're doing in the class, and so I got to see some of the inner workings of the philosophy at work, so to speak. And it really struck me seeing the kids. So again, we call it music development. So it is a social development thing for the kids because they're coming into this setting, performing music together or experiencing music together. The parents are advised to not guide the kids on how to play. They want the kids to have freedom of how to experience the class themselves. One of the principles for the teachers is what's called accept and include. The teachers are guided to use anything that the children are doing and try to incorporate that into the class. So going back to the videos, I've seen that in the kids, when the teacher does that and the kid sees that their simple action is being incorporated and accepted, I could see them just open up and relax and like say, wow, I'm seen, It's pretty powerful.
I would imagine that the majority of kids are really enthusiastic about this and enjoy it. Are there instances where kids, just for whatever reason, just don't care? It just doesn't have relevance to them?
Seemingly, yes. Mm-hmm. There are kids who will come and they'll just stay in their parents' lap and they won't engage in class at all. And parents might complain about that. And those are the parents that might want to try to get them to engage. Mm-hmm. But we've heard so many times when they get home, the kid runs around the room, sings, dances, does everything that they did in class. They do everything that was done in class at home, but even though they were just sitting there in the class. And that's one of the key lessons for the parents, is that the kids are sponges. Mm-hmm. They're observing. Mm-hmm. They're just taking it all in. And that's why one of the most important things for the parents is to model the behavior. So we encourage the parents to participate and let the kids either participate or not. That gets to the music itself, which you've heard some of. So we don't dumb the music down for the kids. And I think the little bit you've heard, I think you would agree. It's not childish music.
No. I mean, it's not real complex with a lot of varying structure, but it isn't, the same line over and over and over. I mean, it's good music.
Yeah. And that's part of the genius of the founder of Music Together, Ken Gilmartin. He's also the music producer that I work with and have worked with over the years there. And he realized at the outset, really, he's like, well, we need to make music that the parents like to hear.
Right.
Otherwise, they're not going to play it for their kids.
Right.
Number one, but also the point is to expose the children to the great variety of music. So in each collection, so if you enroll in a semester, you have a collection of music that they use for that semester. And there's 9 different collections. So that always struck me that the child can go consecutively in Music Together for 3 years without repeating a collection. So for 3 years, hear different music each semester.
And when you say different music, you mean different styles, different parts of the world, things like that?
Well, within each collection, yes, and that's what I was getting at. But in broader terms, in terms of being 9 collections, so think of a collection as a CD, and that's what the teacher would use for each class. They would draw from that. So within each collection, there is specifically a variety of tonalities, of meters, including odd meter, and music from different cultures, and probably other criteria as well. But it's specifically designed to be diverse, musically that way. Again, not limiting it just because it's, quote unquote, for children.
Well, I read through the biographies on the website of your board of directors. That's an impressive bunch of people. So obviously, this isn't, just some people that think this music could be good. I mean, everything, I presume, that's chosen was picked because it fulfilled a particular need that they had identified.
Yeah. There's specific musical needs that they look for in each collection. Again, with tonality, meter, different cultures. And I'm not sure which board you were looking at. We also have a music advisory board.
Yeah, I think that's what I was looking at.
Yeah, and that's a newer thing. It's we've enlisted in the last few years to actually to review all the music and future new music that we want to do, just to run it by this panel of experts and see if there's any issues with the music, any history that we're not aware of that we might want to stay away from, anything else, anything that we can't see ourselves, and get all these different eyes and ears on it. Yeah, it's important.
Since the name is Music Together Worldwide, it implies that you have people using this program all over the world. How do you accommodate all those different cultures and languages?
In different ways. First of all, I don't know the latest numbers, but the last I heard, I think in the United States there were 3,000 to 3,500 Music Together locations in the U.S. alone. And at one point before COVID, at least, we were in over 40 different countries. It's impacted me in that we've created an Italian edition. So we have those 9 collections I talked about. There's an Italian edition that has not all those songs in Italian, but a variety of songs are done in Italian throughout the 9 collections. That really started the international editions because at that time the group in Italy was doing so well, and they were just asking for it. And they actually did a lot of the work. That was an interesting process for me because for most of it, I would create instrumental mixes, send that to Italy. They would record their tracks there, send those back over here, and then we put it all together and, maybe go back and forth. So there's an Italian edition, there's a Spanish edition, which has more of the songs in each collection done in Spanish. And typically it's a mix of, we might do one verse in English, then the next verse in Spanish, and back and forth. So we want the English there, but we want to incorporate these different languages as we can in terms of other places around the world. They typically use the English, and in most cases that's okay. Mm-hmm. In most places that's okay with them. In fact, they use that as a way to teach English, and it's a way for them to attract people to come to their class in some cases. They may do their own local translations and versions of songs. So our overarching mission is to make the world better by making it more musical. Yeah, and so definitely there's a deep belief and understanding in that, and that's a big factor, big motivation for everyone who's in the company, really.
Right. Talk a little bit about your job at Music Together. What do you do?
So I took over the audio production about 15 years ago. Mm. Before that, they were doing it in local studios here and there. So actually, when I took over, the basic 9 collections had already been created. So a lot of my job is managing those 9 collections. Each time the semester cycles around that it's used, typically it's a rare when they don't need a new master for some reason. There's some kind of change, And lately, the past 8 years probably, we've been recording a lot of new music and intentionally trying to refresh that set of music, those 9 collections, with injecting a couple new songs into each one each time it cycles around, at least. In the Rhythm Kids program, there's even more new music we're doing for that, and that's recording tracks from scratch, So I mentioned the masters, so I do build the masters there in the studio. I use Sonic Studio Soundblade software, and I'll do the mixes of the new stuff, and I'll incorporate it with the archive material, build a new master. Charlie Pilzer at Airshow Mastering, now Tonal Park in Tacoma. He had done our early masters, and he was a great help in getting me set up in that program, and very generous to help me do that.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, super helpful and just so good. So I do build the masters there, and then we just deliver them to disc makers when we're ready to print. Any new songs? I'm recording, mixing, and, quote unquote, mastering in-house. With the DW Fern equipment up front, I can just put a nice Fairchild stereo compressor on the master bus with some limiting and just get it in range, and that's all that's needed, because the sound is, I don't need to fix anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly has made my job easier. I mean, that's what they say, but it's true. So I'm grateful for that. So anyway, typically when we record new music, we're just building it up one track at a time. If we have two musicians come in and record simultaneously, that's about as far as we go. We've had George come and play piano and Joff play bass at the same time, or Ken Gilmartin likes to use Matthew Parrish on bass. He's worked with him so much over the years. Matthew's a great bassist. And, those two have played together, but typically we'll just build a track at a time, and gotten used to doing that and gotten good at it. So we'll record the new music from the ground up. I manage the current collection. There is an app where all the music is available. There's a karaoke feature where the lyrics come up and people can sing along. There's also a slider which looks like you're just turning the vocals off. If you slide it, then you don't hear the vocals. What's really happening is, for every song, I have to create an instrumental version of that.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them, for the MP3s that are delivered on the app, they have to be perfectly phase aligned, because they're actually playing simultaneously. And what seems like you're just turning vocals off, you're just turning that one entire mix down.
So in other words, there's two mixes, one with vocals and one without?
Correct.
Wow, that's challenging.
It's a huge job, yeah. So managing that, the MP3s for digital delivery is a big part of the job. And that instrumental feature, getting that to work was a little tricky.
Yeah. What's the studio like? Can you describe what your actual performance space is like?
Sure. The studio is in the office building of the headquarters of Music Together in Hopewell, New Jersey. And I work out of a small control room, I don't know, maybe 11 by 17, something like that, which I started at Music Together before they moved into this building. They knew they wanted this capability there. So we, at least for that room, we were able to really, we stripped all the walls and packed it with mineral fiber, all kinds of whatever treatment I could do. Actually, a person who consulted with us, John Williams, worked with Sony in New York, and they were shutting down their studios. We actually went there. John, when he contracted with us, part of the deal was he gave us all these panels and acoustical fabric that were left over there at Sony. So we had a lot of good acoustical materials to work with and some time to spend. So I think it worked. It actually sounds pretty good in there, I think. And actually, there's in one corner, I've set up panels that I can remove and stuff, but that's had been our main booth. I was saying we layer tracks, and typically they would record right there in the control room because the rest of the space was office space. Since COVID, everyone else has been working remotely, so I've been able to take over some of the other building and other spaces. And now our booth is in another interior office area. So adjacent to the control room is what was the classroom. Again, before COVID, that's where they would have the classes. We wired into that room so that when needed, we could use that as a studio space. And then there is in the building what we call a community room. I'm not good at dimensions. Maybe it's like 40 by 80.
Oh, big space.
It's a pretty big space.
Yeah.
And it's beautifully done, quite live. That's where the piano is, Steinway B.
Mm-hmm.
We're wired to there as well. Analog snake, with a patch panel on the wall. If we want an acoustic piano, we'll set up in there and just hope the road outside is quiet, you know. So those spaces we can use. During COVID, in order to keep things going, I expanded even more out into some of the office space. I set up a producer's desk for Ken Gilmartin so he could come in and sit away from me and everyone else. Musicians could be in the big room or in the booth in the office. And then part of the trick was getting the cue system to work everywhere without having to run wires each time. But I used the internal wiring of the Ethernet wiring of the building. And because we used the Aviom cue system, we just daisy chain over the Ethernet. And I was able to go down into the server room downstairs and patch where I needed to get it to come up. It was quite seamless. And then we would even use Zoom and iPads for visual, especially for people that were producing remotely. There's someone, Deanna DeCampos, who's doing more of the producing now. She's up in New York a lot, so she would sometimes Zoom in, and we'd have that all arranged so that each person could hear the other person and see the other person. Got to be a little complex, but it worked. It was kind of cool.
That sounds like a great solution. What's your mic collection like? I mean, what do you like using? I know the mic preamp you prefer, which is wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
But what mics are you finding are most useful to you for different things?
It's a very limited collection, really. I mean, we have some mics we've collected over the years. You know, I have a stereo set of 414s, but I really don't use them. So typically, I use Joff Hazelrig, built for us, 2 C12 tube mics.
Right. Yeah, they're great.
They're great. Thank you, Joff. Those are really my go-to mics.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned recording the piano. Typically, we take the lid off and put the R88 over top of that. Don't bother with anything else, really. And I have an R84 I'll use on different sources. I do have a set of DPA 2011s, the small condenser pencil mics. They're not even the higher end DPA mics, but I might use those for drum overheads or something like that, where I need additional mics. But again, since we're building tracks one at a time, I rarely need more than 2 mics at a time.
Mm-hmm. So when you record drums, how do you mic them?
It's been a minimal approach. Use my own drum set, which is a small Tama Stage Star kit. It's small but mighty. Mm-hmm. It has a good sound, whether I'm playing them or not. We had John O'Reilly come and play on a track, and he used my kit and brought some of his own cymbals and stuff. It had a great sound. Typically, I put a Heil PR40 on the kick drum, and then I mic the snare and the hi-hat, and have 2 overheads, and that's it. So the overheads, again, I've used those DPAs. Also, for some of the other work at Music Together, we got Earthworks Flex Wand, the FW730. They're really choral microphones, and they're cardioid. They have a very wide cardioid pattern. Those I find work great for overheads. And that's it. I'm able to get enough of the toms for the music that we do. Yeah. And I like the simplicity of it, but it also has a nice natural sound.
I know you bring in some really top-notch studio people to play on some of these tracks, but I don't know if all of them, but it seems to me all of them that I've heard also had kids singing, and they sound just phenomenal. I was just so impressed with those kids. They're really, really talented. But as I'm listening to that, I'm thinking, what are the challenges of taking somebody, that really doesn't understand the recording process and bringing them into a studio, which might be really intimidating to them? How do you go about getting the best performance out of them?
Yeah, it's a piece of cake, Give them a piece of cake, and then they'll do whatever you want. Yeah, it's a good question. There can be quite a challenge. Mm-hmm. It depends on the kid. All depends on the kid. There's some kids that come in and they just blow you away. they're so focused and they're so happy to be there. And there's one girl, might do a take and say, "Oh, I was a little flat on the last half of that verse," and she was right, but she was aware enough musically and with her ear to know that. And
how old are these kids?
I think that girl's maybe around 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we've had kids in there, I think as early as 5. Is that right? Yeah, possibly. For some of the Spanish work, to get that really young sound, But there are definitely challenges. Generally, the kids are excited to be there. It's fun. It's new. It's cool, That can work against us, So it might be too enamored of the process and kind of goofing around and playing with things. Of course, you tell them don't touch the mic, and what are they going to do?
Well, I've worked with adult musicians that had those same kinds of problems.
Yeah, definitely. So it depends on the kid, but we've worked up various methods, me and the producer, Ken or Deanna. When we did the Spanish work, we'd have different people in the room for the Spanish. They're also great vocalists and might be vocal coaches, but they also can make sure they're getting the right pronunciation. And that can be a real challenge. And I'd say in the worst case, what we'll do is we'll forget about the track altogether. And I'll either set up a cue mix that's just a rhythm, or, we don't like to do this, but sometimes we have to, just a click. And feed in a piano, and the other coach, the vocal coach, will have the rhythm and will play and sing to them. And here you go, boo, boo, boo. And then you sing it back to me, and back and forth for however long until you think you got it. And it'll break it down as small as you need to, depending on their capacity. That's what I would say, this is the worst case, where you really have to do it piece by piece. And then it's a huge editing job, and just finding, that one part that was good can be quite a challenge. Typically, though, you can just do a bunch of takes, and then, it helps to have the coach there who can, they're also very good at working with the kids. Sometimes their parents might be in the room there too, depending on how comfortable the kid is, and the parents are, to have their kid there without them being there. So it can be a lot of minute back and forth, and then a lot of editing afterwards.
Yeah, sounds like it could end up being a lot of work.
Yeah.
Who are the coaches? Are they staff people? Are they people from the outside you bring in?
Typically, Ken Gilmartin, the producer, also serves as a great coach. He's also a singer, sings in Voices Chorale, has done all kinds of music work over the years. He serves that function many times. Deanna, I've mentioned, is a great vocalist, and she's done work on Broadway, and she's a great vocal coach as well. For the Spanish specifically, there's this fellow Jerry Dignan. He's in Chicago. He's on a lot of the recordings, most of the recordings, as a vocalist. He's also was one of the main people that helped with the Spanish, including the translations, but he would also help coach the kids who came in to sing the Spanish. Then a woman, Mary Ellen, another tremendous vocalist. We've had her sing on lots of things, but she would also come in and help coach the kids, and they have great patience.
Sure. Typically, how many different vocalists would be on a piece? Would it just be one, or are there multiple? Could there be a whole choir of people?
Yes.
All the above?
All of the above. Throughout all the entire collection of music, there's a great variety. And, we might have ballads with one singer. There are other tracks with lots of vocal parts, and it's rather complex, all kinds of harmonies. And I think that's one of the strengths of the Music Together music is all the harmony work, really. There's some beautiful harmonies in there.
With the kids singing harmony?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, they break it down, and some of the kids totally get it, and they can just switch, like, okay, we're going to, do the harmony now. Like, okay, what is it? Here, okay, let's go.
So obviously music is your life these days. I mean, as a performer, as a recording engineer, all the kinds of things you do in your job. But where does that come from? Where did you start? Were you in music as a kid?
My father would say yes. He had the old piece of furniture that had the speakers and the turntable, and he played this record called Jungle Drums, and I don't think I was even walking, but I was standing up holding onto the thing, and I was bouncing along to the drums. So my father would always say it was always in me from that point.
Were your parents in music at all?
No, not professionally. My father was, at that time, a dairy farmer, but he loved music. He actually piped his classical music into the barn, so when he was there early morning, he could hear the music, and he loved his Mario Lanza, and he said it helped the cows produce milk as well.
Yeah, I'm sure the cows were enjoying it as well.
Yeah, right. My father recently passed, actually, so it's, touching to bring this up. That music was a great connection that we had. It was really one of our deep connections. And every time the past many years, I'd come up with a new piece of music, I'd bring it over, play it for him. So he wasn't a musician, but he's a deep and true lover of music. And I didn't do much musically until really I was around 14 or so. Listening, I would, sneak into my brother's room and steal his Emerson, Lake and Palmer albums and stuff like that, or borrow them. I wouldn't steal them. In terms of listening, at that early age, I was all about progressive rock, jazz fusion. I didn't listen to what most people my age then were listening to. I was in this whole other realm of music expression. Really, my foray into playing music, I think, really started. I was listening to Stanley Clarke, the School Days album, the song called The Dancer. I remember specifically in my room on my stereo. And it's really funky, and I was just banging on my knee. I was like, playing along on my knee, and my mother walked by and saw me there. I didn't even see her at the time. And then I think the next day she was at a yard sale and saw a set of bongos, so she said, "Here, you shouldn't be banging on your knee, bang on these instead," and got a pair of bongos. And away I went. And then I think not long after that, got a drum set and started banging on those. I didn't start studying till years later in college. Finally started formal study, which ultimately led me to Berklee College of Music in Boston, which was quite a journey just getting there.
Where did you go up?
Central New Jersey,
Okay.
just outside of Princeton. Went to Princeton Day School there. Took a year off after high school. Then I ended up at University of New Hampshire for 2 semesters. And I first took some snare drum lessons there. I did a summer session at Musicians Institute of Technology in Hollywood. So PIT, Percussion Institute of Technology. I did a summer session there on drums. That's where I somehow got the bug to go to Berklee. Got a letter of recommendation from one of the teachers there. Maybe I had to twist his arm a little bit, but I got it. And anyway, ended up at Berklee. Even then, like 2 semesters in, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I kept hearing about this music production and engineering major. And I was like, that sounds cool. Let me look into that. I was always into electronics. I remember in high school, I had these boom boxes. I played cassette. I took it all apart, put it back together without instructions or anything, and this thing still worked, So I was always had that mindset. I finally enrolled in the music production and engineering major, and boy, that was it. I just found my place and found my stride, and I got work study on the tech crew there, and so I went around and helped do the maintenance on all the consoles, calibrating the multi-track machines and the 2-track machines and repairing whatever I could. And I was in heaven. Yeah, it was really something.
Not an atypical path for a lot of people in our business. A lot of people start out, playing music, enjoying music, and then discover, what the studio can do, and that sort of grabs their attention. But you also record your own music, and it's really interesting stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that and the influences and how that came about?
Sure. Yeah, in fact, I was just recording some with my friend Dan Trent yesterday. So I played, while at Berklee, I continued playing the drums. I also, out of the blue, picked up saxophone. I did 2 of my proficiencies on saxophone, and then I did 2 proficiencies on piano. And I also started writing music at Berklee, and I had 2 of my pieces done as student projects there. They were kind of wild fusion pieces. So that all got started there as well, and just continued. So I've been playing the drums all along, including getting into playing hand drums. And the music that you heard that I sent you features these they're called hand pans. That's the generic name. It's like a steel pan for steel drum. It's metal, 2 kind of clamshells together, and there's notes along the top you can play with your hand. It has a very beautiful, ethereal sound, and it's both both melodic and percussive, which when I first was introduced to them, I was like, oh my God, I gotta have one. And I didn't stop.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah, and I didn't stop at one. I've become a collector. That is one part of how I express myself musically. I end up writing quite a bit on those, just out of inspiration. I start playing and these ideas come and one thing leads to another. So I have one album out called Karttikeya, The Transcendent State, with my good friend Vincent Pierce Smith, that we did about 10 years ago now. It's way overdue for another one. And that features the hand pans, and Vincent's an amazing percussionist as well. And we add, I've added keyboards and other things to those tracks as they dictate. I find it's interesting. I find when you're recording a new piece of music, an original piece of music for me, especially, at a certain point you get into recording these ideas, and then eventually at a certain point the song tells you what it's going to be, reveals itself to you, and it might not be what you had in mind originally. I think part of the process is recognizing that and going with it.
Yeah, I've had a saying for decades. I say the music tells you what it needs.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's composing, arrangement, mixing, all those things, it all applies.
Yeah, that's true.
I hate to classify things, but just give people an idea. What are the closest genres that you think describe your music?
Some of it fits into New Age, for sure. World music, world beat, perhaps. I think I'm a little cautious with New Age because it has there's some negative connotations there, but some of what I have and what I have yet to record, the first album we did with Vincent, the Karttikeya, we specifically kept it pretty chill. And the idea was it would accompany yoga practice or maybe even meditation.
Right.
But definitely we could be very energetic with it, and that would be more like world beat, maybe even dance,
Yeah. When I listened to it, I think the first thing that popped into my mind was meditative. Here's an example of music from Kart's group, Karttikeya. Here is a song from the Music Together Worldwide collection, used by permission. This piece is sung in a Creole language from Suriname.
Wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wo wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wo wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wo wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de. Wang boto ikong nanga wang fraga. Wang fraga no mahanga de.
It's very self-contained. It's not public domain music. There are 3 compilations that we made called Family Favorites that are available to the public.
Okay.
Those are available on iTunes. Even those don't have like the newest music that we're doing.
But I really appreciate you coming here to record this. And, my goal with this podcast has always been to provide as many different perspectives on the world of music and recording as I can. I search out things that are non-traditional in what most of us do in the studio. And I think this provides us with an entirely different kind of perspective on what recorded music can be.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kart, I really appreciate the time. And for those people out there that are curious, this is one of the few podcast episodes that I've recorded live in the studio with a guest. Kart and I are sitting here in my studio with 2 AEA 44 mics, and they're going through a VT2 preamp into a VT5 equalizer just to roll off some of the low end, and then a VT7 compressor, which is just catching any real high peaks, but mostly not doing a whole lot. Recorded at 24-bit 96K, and the editing will be done in that format, and then it'll be converted to the podcast format. So again, Kart, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. It's been a great pleasure, and wish you all the best.
Yep, thanks to you too.
Thank you.
I've been talking with Karttikeya from Music Together International. You can learn more about Music Together at their website, musictogether.com, and more about Karttikeya and Turiya from turiyamusic.com. Your questions, comments, and suggestions are always welcome. Email me at dwfern@dwfern.com. And your reviews and ratings are helpful for others to find this podcast on any of the 30-plus podcast providers that carry it. Thanks. This is my take on music recording. I'm Doug Fern. See you next time.